Hey everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome to MsMojo. How much do you know about your family tree? How much do you want to know? I know I've always wanted to be on one of those genealogy shows so I can find out more about my ancestors. You never know what you might learn. I bet these celebrities were surprised. Actually, let's start off by looking at 10 celeb reactions to Who Do You Think You Are?
And I just thought I shared the same last name as Dr. King.
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most animated or noteworthy responses from stars digging into their lineage on Who Do You Think You Are? We'll only be covering episodes from the American version of the series.
What? Oh my gosh, he's alive! I can't believe it.
Number 10. Bradley Whitford. Actor and activist Bradley Whitford traced his ancestry to German immigrants who made the journey from Prussia to America in 1846.
It's a pretty gutsy move.
It definitely was.
So what happens next?
He discovered that his great-great-grandfather, Frederick New, served under Ulysses S. Grant at 1863's Siege of Vicksburg, along with his two brothers. Thankfully, all three siblings survived. Frederick went on to have a significant legacy as an upstanding citizen, and reading his glowing obituary moved Whitford to tears.
Funeral will be held Monday, noon. Here? Wow.
Given Whitford's own political activism, he was pleasantly surprised to learn that he descends from courageous, hardworking immigrants who fought in the American Civil War.
This idea that everybody should be able to vote makes me the most proud to be Frederick's descendant.
Number 9. Jim Parsons. Jim Parsons, known for his starring role as Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory, decided to honor his late father by exploring his paternal family tree.
Because family was so important to my father, I'd really like to do this for him, in honor of his memory.
In doing so, he discovered that he descends from important figures in the arts and sciences. In Louisiana, he learns of his third great-grandfather, Dr. Jean-Baptiste Hacker. The 55th graduate of the Medical College of Louisiana, he documented the yellow fever epidemic in the New Orleans Medical and Surgical Journal.
He was literally walking through versions of hell where he was going.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
It is horrifying.
Absolutely horrifying.
Then, all the way over in France, Parsons researches his sixth great-grandfather, Louis-Francois Trouard, a celebrated architect who worked for royalty. Parsons realizes Trouard had a similarly supportive father, making his accomplishments all the more impressive and meaningful.
I don't know what I would have done. I really don't know what I would have become without my father.
Number 8. Sean Hayes. In an effort to find out more about his estranged father, Ronald, Sean Hayes goes digging in Chicago and Ireland.
I had a father who wasn't present all the time. I think he left when I was like 5, and because of that, obviously, we don't have a relationship now.
But what he discovers is more than he anticipated. Ronald and his siblings were sent to an orphanage, and that their father, William, was someone who faced various hardships and ultimately died of illness. Going back further, we learned that the actor's great-great-grandfather, Patrick Hayes Sr., had similarly difficult experiences and got into legal trouble. He even went to court against his sons.
So my great-great-grandfather is bringing his children to court. Correct.
Hayes' great-grandfather, Patrick Hayes Jr., also had a criminal record before moving to the United States. Despite unearthing his family's less-than-savory past, Hayes was simply thrilled and amazed with the whole research process.
And that's his signature.
Yeah.
Is this the actual ink, the actual?
This is the actual document.
That is amazing to me.
Number 7. Zooey Deschanel. Growing up, Zooey Deschanel knew that she descended from a line of remarkable women and activists.
I feel honored to be related to one of these people.
They were very brave.
Supporting my mother's theory that I come from a long line of strong women, but it's an even longer line than
Absolutely.
Following the lineage of her late paternal grandmother, Anne Orr, who passed away not long before the episode, Deschanel traveled to Pennsylvania to delve in her Quaker origins. Her four-time great-grandmother, Sarah Pownall, an abolitionist whose father enslaved someone, had a farm that aided in the Underground Railroad.
This is proof that your ancestor, Sarah Pownall, and her entire family were deep, deep, deep in the Underground Railroad.
Wow.
It was also the site of the Christiana Renaissance of 1851, a historical event that fueled the anger of John Wilkes Booth. While she knew about her courageous ancestors' involvement in the anti-slavery movement, Deschanel did not expect them to be such an important part of history.
Because this is so much greater than just a family. This is a huge movement.
Number 6, Christina Applegate.
Oh, Dad, this is crazy.
Well,
this is gonna be crazy.
I know it is, huh? After all these years,
I know.
finally get the chance to
I
find out
know.
who I am,
And you
who
were-
we are.
For actress Christina Applegate, uncovering details from her genealogy was a way to provide some much-needed answers for her father Robert, who never really knew his mother. She found that her grandparents, Lavina Shaw and Paul Applegate, had a marriage that ended in divorce and led to a difficult custody battle. Applegate struggled to read the details of Paul's alleged mistreatment of Lavina and was visibly saddened by a document saying her father was malnourished at one point.
Malnutrition. I'm just angry at these two people. I'm so angry at them.
While the research didn't produce the happiest of results, the experience at least provided some closure for the Applegates.
The beauty of this is that you can be incredibly proud that you broke the pattern.
Number 5, J.K. Rowling. Controversial author of the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling knows about epic stories and extensive family trees, so it's no surprise she has an interesting French genealogy. One ancestor she'd heard a lot about was her great-grandfather Louis Vallon, a recipient of the Legion of Honor in the First World War.
He take grenades to the fort.
Oh, okay. So he was bringing the he was bringing them armaments.
He was bringing grenades to the fort.
Decades later, Rowling was honored with the same award for literature. However, the story she heard about her relative isn't true.
So I mean, it's really inspiring to hear what this man did, but this is not my great-grandfather. This is not my great-grandfather.
However, Vallon was still very much a hero and was bestowed the Croix de Guerre Medal for Bravery. Rowling makes another illuminating discovery that she comes from generations of single moms, echoing her own motherhood experience.
What I'm very struck by is how many single mothers I'm descended from in this line of the family.
These include her great-grandmother, Lizzie Smith, twice great-grandmother, Salome Schuch, and three-time great-grandmother, Christine. Number 4, Regina King. Regina King set out to find more information about her maternal genealogy and came across great-great-grandfather Moses Crosby, aka Moses Hughes.
Moses Hughes of Northport.
The blacklist was another sort of tool of intimidation.
After discovering many hardships and injustices he faced, it doesn't take long for the actress to become emotional. King is shocked to see that Crosby had a prison record, but learning the whole story is heartbreaking.
This was just days after his wife was murdered.
Yes.
Boy, they make sure they keep their foot in your neck, huh?
After getting out, Crosby became a pastor and co-founded Morning Star Association, an organization instrumental in paving the way for Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. The latter is famously where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a pastor. Not only was Crosby an activist in his own right, he also aided the civil rights movement decades after. You can tell how much that means to King.
To put a pin in this journey at this place is magical.
Number 3, Rita Wilson. A few years after her father passed away, multi-talented artist Rita Wilson decided to trace his roots.
My father, when we asked him about his history, it was one of those things where you don't really talk about it.
Though he went by Alan in the States, he was born Asan Alil Ibrahimov in Greece sometime in the 1920s and later moved to Bulgaria. Wilson travels to both countries to uncover secrets of his past, from serving in the military to escaping a labor camp.
I gave 5 shots
And the militiamen came and spread out to search for them in the fields, but that was all. Hasta la vista, baby.
She's most shocked to hear that Hassan was previously married to a woman named Alice and had a son, Emil. Unfortunately, both of them passed. This heartbreaking reveal understandably leaves Wilson devastated. But thankfully, she has the incredible opportunity to meet her uncle and reminisce about Hassan.
It's so nice to meet you.
He's really happy that you're here to meet him.
Number 2, Lisa Kudrow. Who Do You Think You Are? Executive producer Lisa Kudrow has one of the most harrowing episodes of the series. Looking into her father's Eastern European Jewish lineage, she heads to Belarus, where she reads horrific accounts of the Holocaust and notably visits the village of Ilya.
And I'm so happy that she got to grow up here. And it's so pretty, and I'm also so happy that she got out.
Unfortunately, her great-grandmother was amongst the Jewish residents who were killed there during the Second World War. Naturally, she's visibly shaken by the loaded history.
Thus ended Ilya, a Jewish community with centuries of a glorious history.
But at least Kudrow's journey ends on a high note in Poland, where she tracks down Yuri Barudin, a relative previously believed to be deceased. She's able to meet Yuri and his family, a touching moment in an otherwise heavy episode.
It's finally good, it's finally happy, it's so... it's such a relief.
Before we unveil our top pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Lionel Richie. The musician learns his great-grandfather was instrumental in the fight for civil rights.
J.L. Brown was at the forefront in building a significant institution to meet the needs of African Americans across the nation.
Unbelievable. This is unbelievable.
Number 1, Sarah Jessica Parker. In Who Do You Think You Are's first episode, Sarah Jessica Parker discovers she has connections to not one, but 2 significant historical events. Beginning in her hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, Parker learns about her great-great-great-great-grandfather, John S.
Hodge. He shows up.
Yes.
And it does say he was born in Ohio, and he is the right age.
Unbelievable.
He's a
minor?
He's a minor.
He's a minor.
Mm-hmm.
The miner traveled from Ohio to California during the gold rush, arriving in 1850 and sadly passing away that same year. Over in New England, Parker finds that her 10th great-grandmother, Esther Dutch Elwell, was accused in the Salem witch trials, but thankfully survived.
They finally decided by the fall of 1692, we've been convicting people on the evidence of the devil, and this is a terrible mistake.
Coincidentally, one of the actress's most famous roles was Sarah Sanderson in the witchy Hocus Pocus. Given everything she learns about her family, SJP has some of the most expressive reactions in the series.
It's crazy time. I mean, it's like you could see that those are like fury, it's madness.
And she was worried about not being interesting. Do you have any shocking revelations in your family tree?
This would be considered a genealogical gold mine to find your great-great-grandmother who was once enslaved.
Who Do You Think You Are has featured funny reactions, dramatic reactions, and everything in between. But sadly, the stories of some celebrity ancestors are pretty dark. Here are 10 of the darkest family reveals on Who Do You Think You Are.
If you look then again in 1888, the picture changes dramatically again.
Right. Yeah, drunk and disorderly on the public street, just over and over and over again.
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most disturbing discoveries uncovered in celebs' ancestry.
Oh my God.
Number 10, Courtney Cox. Friends star Courtney Cox set out to trace her mother's English lineage. She doesn't expect any spectacular revelations, so she's surprised to find royal roots, including her 26 times great-grandfather, William the Conqueror.
So he's the reason why England is here? You conquered it from France.
Yeah.
Okay. This is pretty intense.
Another one of Cox's ancestors is her 18 times great-grandfather, Thomas de Berkeley. The English baron's Gloucestershire home of Berkeley Castle served as a prison for the abdicated King Edward II in 1327.
So this is where Edward II was held prisoner for 5.5 months.
This is also where he died, and while some accounts credit natural causes, others believed he was killed.
They said late king was shut up in a closed chamber, but that not sufficing to hasten his death.
The historian shared the rumours detailing Edward's gruesome death, though it's believed that he was ultimately murdered via suffocation.
In a sense, it was a crime against God as much as it was a crime against the king, and it was a crime against the kingdom.
Berkeley and Cox's 19 times great-grandfather, Roger Mortimer, were put on trial. The former was acquitted, while the latter was executed.
Okay, this is one of the greatest soap operas I've ever heard.
Number 9, Steve Buscemi. Like others on this list, actor-filmmaker Steve Buscemi's reason for digging into his genealogy is his mother.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay.
The Brooklyn native never met his grandmother, Amanda Van Dyne, because she took her life when his mother was very young.
After my mother died, my sister had this made up.
She had it made up because there were so few pictures of
There's
her.
no yeah.
In his search, he found that his great-great-grandfather, Ralph Montgomery, had a rough go of it.
Well, I was talking about going down dark roads, and this certainly seems like one.
By 1860, he switched professions from a dentist to a grocer. Based on a discarded letter, this was also around the time he contemplated ending his own life.
But then, months later, it's found, and not only found, but printed in the newspaper.
In 1861, he became a Union soldier in the Civil War, left his family, and later started a new one. Though Montgomery ultimately died of tuberculosis in 1878, Buscemi theorizes that generations of his family have suffered from depression.
But when I think of the past generations, the things that they went through, and that they survived, it really makes me so much more appreciative of my family.
Number 8, Jason Sudeikis. SNL alum Jason Sudeikis set out to find the mysterious circumstances of his paternal grandfather Stanley's death in 1948.
Don't know how, don't know where, don't know what happened or, how that affected my gram and obviously my dad.
He learned that Stanley married his wife Edna on September 25th, 1945, abandoning her the same day, leaving behind his daughter and unborn son, Daniel, Jason's father. He never supported them financially, and by 1947, they legally separated.
So he never even met my dad.
Not according to the court record.
Up to this point.
That's right.
That's heavy duty.
Reading the fatal sidewalk accident report, Jason discovered that Stanley was unhoused at the time of his death. His ex-wife and uncle's refusal to be involved suggested that he may have burned too many bridges with his substance use.
We contacted his wife, and we asked her to attend the inquest, and she stated that she wanted nothing to do with it, that she had been legally separated for 3 years.
Going back further, Stanley Sr. also abandoned his family. But the tragic irony is that Stanley Sr.'s father, Joseph, died while working to provide for his family.
I feel it is a form of closure, this journey, to relay the information to my dad.
Number 7, Marisa Tomei. For Marisa Tomei, this foray into genealogical research was intended to uncover the truth about her great-grandfather, Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi's death in 1910.
The story is that he was shot in a bar.
The family's story was that he was killed because of a misdeed, possibly for having an affair or getting into financial trouble. But as Tomei travels around Tuscany, she finds pieces that make up a different story. In 1911, a man named Terzilio Lazaretsky claimed he was attacked by Bianchi and shot him in self-defense.
Treacherously shot Leopoldo Bianchi, killing him on the spot.
However, it was reported that the bullet entered the back of Bianchi's head. Despite evidence suggesting murder, Lazaretsky was acquitted of voluntary homicide.
Self-defense.
Yeah,
Coming
it is
from behind.
a strange and bizarre.
The animosity between the men stemmed from a business deal gone wrong, not to any philandering on Bianchi's part, as his family believed.
And now I have much more of a connection to him. I can feel his presence. He's much more. He's alive in my heart and in my mind's eye and in my family again.
Number 6, Megan Mullally. Like fellow actress Marisa Tomei, Megan Mullally grew up hearing stories about her relatives.
My
grandfather, my father's father, he was an alcoholic.
Her grandfather was violent towards his sons, behaviour that her father would later exhibit himself. Because of his emotional and verbal mistreatment throughout her childhood, Megan prepared to uncover some dark truths about her paternal ancestors.
I still have certain questions on my father's side where the psychological and emotional darkness in my family comes from.
Through newspapers and court records, she finds that her great-great-grandfather, Richard Ira Mullally, was charged and convicted of physically abusing his pregnant wife Elizabeth in 1859. After his death, Elizabeth married her second husband, James Venable, with whom she endured similar mistreatment. Even though Megan anticipated the outcome, she's still saddened to learn about the troubling history of substance use disorders and violence involving the men on her father's side.
That makes me really sad.
Number 5. Chelsea Handler. Comedian, author Chelsea Handler was raised Jewish, although her mother Rita was Mormon.
My father, I guess, made a deal with my mother when they had children that they were going to be raised Jewish.
Rita was born in Germany and lived there until her father, Karl Stoker, a German soldier in World War II, brought the family to the United States. The big mystery was where Grandpa Karl's loyalties lay, and Handler dreaded he might have had ties to the Nazis.
He was a Nazi enthusiast, and this is where my grandfather worked.
Exactly.
So that makes my grandfather what?
In Germany, she tried to gauge his enthusiasm through his military records, which showed that he was drafted and seemingly lacked ambition to advance rank. But one of the saddest parts of the episodes sees Handler reading her grandmother Elizabeth's tragic account of life in post-World War I Germany. She details the grim conditions, unemployment, extreme poverty, and scarcity of food.
Oh yes, I can see my mother's head vividly when she bent her head over us. Her tears dropping onto our cheeks when we asked for a small piece of bread, saying, "Children, I don't have anything."
Number 4. Jessie Tyler Ferguson. Modern Family star Jessie Tyler Ferguson comes from a line of Jessies, including his paternal grandmother, whom he was named after.
The moment my grandmother passed away, you don't have that person to talk to get those personal stories from.
She was named after her father, Jesse Wheat Uppercue, a lawyer who was also seemingly a career criminal. The first piece of information Ferguson finds on his great-grandfather is an article about the 1872 death of Baltimore resident Amelia Wheat, Uppercue's elderly aunt.
Okay, well this got juicy really fast.
He was arrested as a murder suspect, but made it through 2 trials without a guilty verdict. Throughout his life, JW moved around the country, getting into more trouble, including 2 arrests for embezzlement, all while going through 3 marriages that all ended in divorce.
Pull it together, Jessie. What happened?
However, Ferguson's happy to hear that the otherwise disappointing relative cared for his 5 children.
But when they divorced, he continued to take care of them as his own. I'm proud of him.
Number 3. Christina Applegate. Growing up, Christina Applegate didn't know much, if anything, about her paternal grandparents. Sadly, her father Robert didn't either.
I want to know why my grandmother couldn't take care of him. Not just because of her age, there has to be another reason.
He was raised by his grandparents and only knew of rumours about how and when his mother died. On her genealogical journey, she finds that Lavina Shaw and Paul Applegate, her grandparents, went through a tumultuous divorce and custody battle in the 1940s.
Wait a minute, when did they first separate?
Well, do you want to take a look?
During the legal proceedings, a doctor reported that young Robert appeared to be malnourished, a discovery that visibly upsets Applegate.
And on various dates struck and beat her.
More shocking revelations are Paul's alleged mistreatment of Lavina, as well as her struggles with chronic substance use, which likely contributed to her early death. Though Robert is shocked to learn the details of his mother's life, he finally has some closure.
And I really, really hope with all my heart that at the end of the process, he really sees what a miracle he is.
Number 2, Regina King. Looking into her maternal ancestry, Regina King digs deeper into the life of her 2 times great-grandfather, Moses Crosby, aka Moses Hughes, an educator and civil rights activist.
Using Moses' name, I then look for the family in Alabama, since I know that's where Alice lived, and I locate them on the 1900 census.
While living in Alabama in 1868, An altercation with a white man got Moses' name added to the local Ku Klux Klan's blacklist, making him a target in the white community.
It gives permission for white men and women to attack at will those who are listed.
One night, a group of KKK members broke into Moses' home, and though he escaped, his wife, Mary Meadow, was shot and killed.
Okay, let me stop.
Within days, he was charged with assault and attempted murder of the white man and received a 2-year sentence.
When we think about all of this, the context of who the jurors were and the fact that this sets the perfect scenario for Moses to be handed a judgment of guilty.
Moses endured many hardships, but King admires his perseverance in the face of racism and injustices.
Moses' entire story is very similar to stories that we're still hearing today.
Number 1, Lisa Kudrow. Since she was young, actress Lisa Kudrow, executive producer of Who Do You Think You Are, heard tell of Belarusian Jewish family members' devastating lives during the Holocaust.
Most American Jews from Eastern Europe, they have a Holocaust story. There were relatives that were left behind.
In season 1 of the series, she travels to the site of the 1942 Ilya massacre, where 750 to 900 Jewish villagers were killed, including her paternal great-grandmother, Mira Mordechowitz.
The local Christian population later told us that for many hours they could hear from afar the screams.
Kudrow knew about this horrific time in history and the tragic deaths of her ancestors and countless others.
Thus ended Ilya, a Jewish community with centuries of a glorious history.
But being in Ilya and reading about the detailed atrocities that were committed decades before, she couldn't help but get emotional.
You make people afraid enough of something completely manufactured, and you can drive them to become murderers, cold-blooded murderers.
What reveal did you think was the darkest? Have you uncovered anything shocking in your family's history?
So you take care of your own.
Yeah.
You look out for your own.
Yeah.
And
it feels like everyone who's ever been on this show learned something completely unexpected that fills in the blanks on some family legend. Oftentimes, it's actually quite touching. In fact, the subjects of the show have even met with long-lost relatives more than once. Let's look at some of the most heartwarming moments on Who Do You Think You Are?
may it live long and prosper. Will what? That's crazy. That's insane.
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most touching and uplifting moments on the American version of Who Do You Think You Are?
That's amazing. I know. Don't make me cry. I've been crying this whole trip. Imagine.
Number 10, Zooey Deschanel.
It's not often you get the opportunity to research your roots and be in the place that your ancestors were, and I think that's a really incredible opportunity, and so I am excited.
Zooey Deschanel comes from a famous family of artists and entertainers. She also descends from human rights activists, including her paternal grandmother, Anna Ward Orr. Tracing her Quaker roots, the actor-singer learns about ancestors from Pennsylvania who heavily contributed to the fight for racial equality.
That's wonderful. So she has been appointed to a committee that is rallying to inspire a more impassioned approach to ending slavery.
That's exactly what she's doing.
Deschanel discovers that her four-time great-grandmother Sarah Pownell, the daughter of a slave owner, was a vocal abolitionist and later owned property that aided the Underground Railroad. She had the opportunity to read a document from 1848 detailing Sarah's vital role as a member of an anti-slavery committee.
What an impassioned letter.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's truly moving. I feel honored to be related to one of these people.
They were very brave.
Supporting my mother's theory that I come from a long line of strong women.
Deschanel was moved by her bravery and compassion, especially when speaking out about having such beliefs was dangerous. Number 9, Spike Lee. Legendary filmmaker Spike Lee appeared on Who Do You Think You Are to learn more about his maternal ancestry, something he wished he did sooner. During his research, he found that his grandmother, Zimmy Retha, had a grandfather named Mars Jackson.
His father's name was Mars. That's familiar.
In his first feature film, 1986's She's Gotta Have It, Lee played a character called Mars, a name suggested by his grandmother.
And it fit because Mars in the film is crazy. That's insane.
He was pleasantly surprised by the connection and wanted to know more about the life of his great-great-grandfather. Mars was a farmer born into slavery who went on to own more than 80 acres of land after emancipation. Inspired by his story, Spike Lee visited Mars's former land, honoring his ancestor along with his fictional namesake.
And at one time, my great-great-grandfather, Mars Jackson, owned this land.
Number 8. Marissa Tomei.
I received word you are in Italy looking into your family history and wanted to get in touch to tell you what I know of your ancestors.
Marissa Tomei turned to genealogical research to find the truth about the murder of her maternal great-grandfather, Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi. Growing up, she heard that he was killed due to his philandering ways, leaving his widow Adelaida to raise 2 children on her own. She confirmed he met a tragic end, shot by a man named Terzilio Lazzareschi. However, Leopoldo's murder was over a business deal gone wrong, not because of any misdeeds. Researchers also found a living relative named Rosetta Vanucci, daughter of Leo's sister Bruna Bianchi, making her Tomei's first cousin twice removed.
I am Rosetta Vanucci, the daughter of Bruna Bianchi, who was your great-grandfather Leopoldo Bianchi's sister, making me your grandfather Armando Bianchi's cousin and your first cousin twice removed.
In a letter, Rosetta explained how Adelaida married a good man who provided for the family, painting a much happier picture than what Tomei's family believed for decades.
This story really isn't a story of a broken family. She went on to marry a great, great guy, and my grandpa had a really great life.
Number 7. Molly Shannon.
This picture is incredible.
This picture was taken in this house. And this was the house your grandfather left to go to America from.
At a very young age, SNL alum Molly Shannon lost her mother, youngest sister, and cousin in a car accident. Growing up, she never knew her maternal grandparents, Owen Keating, formerly Cadogan, and Mary Madden. On her episode of Who Do You Think You Are, Shannon travels to Ireland to trace her mother's side of the family, and visits her grandfather's hometown of Cloughmore on the island of Achill.
I wanted to show you this particular piece of land because it is surrounded by enormous handmade stone walls. And those walls were built by your ancestors, your great-grandfather, Owen Cadogan Sr.
There she meets 2 cousins who share their fond memories of Owen, including how proudly he spoke about his daughter. Shannon tears up hearing about the love her grandfather had for her mother, 2 people she tragically lost too early in life.
He died right when I was born, and then my mom died when I was 4, so it's just so sweet, you know.
Number 6. Julie Chen Moonves.
I have so many more questions about this man's life.
Julie Chen Moonves knew her maternal grandfather, Lu Gatong, had a rags-to-riches story with the impression that he was a wealthy playboy type. However, in her ancestry research, she discovered that he made a great impact in China, providing relief to refugees during the War of Resistance. He was also a philanthropist. In 1937, Lu Gatong and his brother Lun Jinzi co-founded the Anshan Primary School in their village of Penglai, China. Moonves felt proud of her grandfather's humanitarianism and heroism, especially after visiting the school, where she saw firsthand how he empowered youth through education.
It says the funeral takes place on Sunday. It's so strange because, I never met him, but it's sad.
Number 5. Christina Applegate.
I have asked my father to come here to Trenton so I can sit down with him and share with him the information. I know some of the story is going to be really difficult for him to hear.
Throughout her life, Christina Applegate's paternal grandparents were a mystery. Her father, Robert, was raised by his grandparents and grew up knowing hardly anything about them. Diving into the complicated family tree, Christina learned the ugly truth about the troubled lives of her grandparents, Lavina Shaw and Paul Applegate. In the 1940s, the 2 divorced and fought over custody of their son. Between Paul's alleged abuse of his wife and Lavina's substance use, it's a heartbreaking story.
God, this is just nuts.
Christina shares the unpleasant details with her father, and he's able to finally have closure. She reminds him that he didn't continue the cycle of pain. Instead, he gave his kids a great childhood full of love and care despite not having one himself.
Want me to tell you what the good is?
I like to have a moment of happiness, yeah.
Here's the good, Dad. The beauty of this is that you can be incredibly proud that you broke the pattern and that you raised all of us.
Number 4, Jason Sudeikis. Similar to Christina Applegate, SNL alum Jason Sudeikis went on a genealogical journey to find answers for his father, Dan, who never knew his father. Stanley and Edna Sudeikis married on September 25, 1945 in Chicago. On the same day, he abandoned his pregnant wife and their daughter, never providing financial support.
The defendant willfully deserted and absented himself from the plaintiff without any reasonable cause.
In 1948, Stanley, unhoused and often under influence of substances, died on a sidewalk. When he was young, his father, Stanley Sr., left to start another family.
I'm certainly proud and very fortunate to have had my father.
Jason relays these harrowing discoveries to his parents and siblings, and in a touching moment, he praises his dad for being present and giving their family a fortunate life.
You know, you've taken a lot of time over this last 10 years to sort of like apologizing to me, thinking you didn't do enough or were too hard here. Yeah, and I just, you know, I don't think you need to do that ever again.
Number 3, Regina King. On her genealogical journey, Regina King learned about her maternal great-great-grandfather Moses Crosby, aka Moses Hughes, and the racial injustices he faced.
It is also the political center of the black community. You got to remember that black folk could not gather anywhere else other than the church. Everything was off limits.
In 1868, he was targeted by the Ku Klux Klan in Alabama after an altercation with a white man, and a group of them broke into his home and killed his wife. Moses was later charged with assault and attempted murder of the white man and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Soon after his release, the educator and activist became a pastor, co-founding Morning Star Association.
Wow, this man. He was a pastor.
The organization paved the way for Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a pastor. Regina was overjoyed and inspired to discover that Moses continued working to create a better world.
Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, of course, gave rise to the modern-day civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Number 2, Lisa Kudrow. One of the first episodes of the U.S. version of Who Do You Think You Are featured executive producer and actor Lisa Kudrow tracing the Eastern European roots of her father. He recalled being young when a Polish relative named Yuri Barudin visited the family in New York to deliver terrible news. Mary Mordechowicz, Lee's grandmother, was among the 750 to 900 Jewish villagers who were killed in the 1942 Ilya massacre.
As soon as the Nazis arrived in Ilya, they showed extreme cruelty toward the Jewish population. They soon started going from home to home, searching for every man, woman, and child.
Lee never saw him again, and Yuri was presumed dead. Kudrow traveled to Belarus to get the full story and learned the tragic, horrifying details. But to her surprise, Yuri was still alive.
Oh my gosh, he's alive! I can't believe it.
Having the chance to meet Yuri and his family was a positive end to a bleak episode.
Oh, it's so nice to see you. It's so good to meet you.
Number 1, Rita Wilson. Rita Wilson's father, Alan, never liked to discuss his past, so 2 years after he passed away, the actor set out to learn more about his early life.
My dad was born in northern Greece in 1920, and so I'm starting my search on Ancestry.com and see if we can find if there's any documents related to the village.
Wilson travels to Greece, where Alan was born Hasan Halilov Ibrahimov, and then to Bulgaria, where his family later moved. She unearths painful secrets, including that his previous wife and child died within months of each other. Wilson meets with Hasan's 96-year-old half-brother Ferhat, still living in Bulgaria. Both are moved to tears as they share a heartfelt hug.
How are you?
Ferhat talks about the emotional reunion with his brother at a labor camp before Hasan escaped and he had to stay behind. The tears keep flowing when he later gives her a letter her father wrote from America.
I came to America on May 4th, 1949.
Which of these moments warmed your heart?
And I hope, I really, really hope with all my heart that at the end of the process, he really sees what a miracle he is.
If you've ever seen a genealogy show before, you know that every so often a celebrity learns something about their family that is not so great. Of course, no one can be held accountable for things their ancestors did decades or even centuries before they were born, but even so, finding out about it on TV can be a bit uncomfortable. Here are some of the most awkward moments on Who Do You Think You Are?
How disposed of, which pains me, I have to say.
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the most awkward and uncomfortable reveals on Who Do You Think You Are. We're looking at moments that are both awkward for the celebrities and perhaps also awkward for the viewers at home, being presented with some uncomfortable truths about British history.
Didn't expect this at all.
Number 10. Squatting complaint.
Apparently that however remembered that he was squatting and they all have to be quiet and they have to blow out the candle and make sure they stay in the dark.
EastEnders star Rose Ayling-Ellis found out that her family history is closer to the fictional soap than first assumed. She found out that her family were pub landlords in days gone by, and that one of her ancestors was once fined for assault after drunkenly slapping a customer.
The vent was very drunk and he came up to him and slapped him in the face.
Later though, she investigated an old family story that they'd once been squatting and found out that it wasn't true.
But they're not squatting because they rented.
You're right, they were paying rent.
They were, in fact, paying tenants, but somebody made a complaint against them, which led to them trying to be as quiet and non-disruptive as possible. The source of the complaint? Kids accidentally throwing a ball over the neighbouring workhouse's wall while playing. They were actually evicted because of this.
Requirement along the neighbour have failed to prove any evidence of disturbance. Indeed, the evidence available goes to show that the Wellesley family are in bed at 10 o'clock at night.
Number 9. Con artist.
At Westminster Police Court, W. Morris Crouch, otherwise Morris Beethoven, late of Ebury Street, Pimlico, was brought up in custody. Oh my God.
Fiona Bruce had a photographer in her family history, but he seemed to lose an awful lot of money, and she wanted to find out where it was going. So she started investigating William Crouch, her great-great-grandfather, by going through photography journals. But it turned out he was a criminal and had been arrested for defrauding people. He'd been asking potential photography apprentices to pay him large deposits, keeping the money for himself.
The prisoner entered into agreements undertaking to make repayment of the deposits, but at the time his affairs were at the lowest pecuniary ebb.
He was caught and ordered to pay, but the money was already gone. The evidence stacked up, and he ultimately pled guilty back in 1904, getting a 5-month sentence and causing a scandal.
Obligation, so that is why he took on so many pupils and assistants, to fleece them. The pupils had little or nothing to do. For some time, the defendant had not a camera on his establishment.
Number 8. Family farms.
They were tenants, what we call tenants at will, so they didn't have a lease.
Throughout the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th, Ireland was in the grips of the Irish Land War, in which the Irish people demanded reform from the country's rich, landowning families.
At the time, the English Crown was seizing land from Irish Catholics and giving it to loyal English Protestant families, like the Palmers.
Julie Walters found out that some of her family, generations ago, were tenants under this system, living in a house owned by an English landlord, Roger Palmer. It's one of many dark chapters in British history, and is a very striking moment when the historian shows the enormous manor house Palmer lived in, paid for by the unwilling tenants across Ireland.
The owners of the land were that privileged, wealthy minority.
Living off the backs of these poor people.
Her family, the Clarks, were also affected by failing crops and potato blights, and ended up unable to pay their rent.
Just the thought of having 4 small children, and also the land not being brilliant land.
Number 7. Gardening drama. Sir Bruce Forsyth went all the way to America after being contacted by a long-lost relative in the States. He finds out that his great-grandfather, Joseph Forsyth Johnson, worked on Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York, in the 19th century.
8 trees were cut, 12 were marked for cutting, and it was made to seem as though, again, he was clear-cutting the park.
But he was ousted when the public decided that his attempts to cut down a few trees to rejuvenate the park were actually an attempt to raise it, and cut down all the trees.
The park royal.
Royal.
And you see here the next sub-headline. Joseph Forsyth Johnson gone.
Gone.
So despite
He was forcibly removed by the park commissioner, trading barbs in newspapers with the park department while trying to demand that they give him a fair hearing. More shocking, Forsyth later finds out that Joseph may have been a bigamist.
He says that Commissioner Summers is only a mechanic and that some people cannot tell sticks from trees.
Number 6. Dodgy stockbroker.
And here in, I think 1862 is another reference to him dealing or brokering gold mining in Wales.
Some of Rupert Everett's relatives are shrouded in mystery, among them his great-great-grandfather Frederick. While searching archives in the British Library, Everett found that he'd been working as a stockbroker for various mining companies.
Investors were encouraged to direct their money into speculative schemes with little official oversight.
But perhaps those mining companies weren't as lucrative as people thought, because he was ultimately arrested for attempting to defraud people by selling them shares and then just pocketing the money, a scam as old as time.
Charge of fraud against a stockbroker. Yesterday, Mr. Frederick Everett, a stockbroker, again appeared before the Lord Mayor.
It's always unpleasant to find out that one of your ancestors may have been a criminal, though the case was dismissed due to lack of evidence. Frederick ultimately went bankrupt and died of TB. Number 5. The Lodger's Secret.
Oh, yes, there he is. James Arthur Edwards. And he's there with Mabel. And who's Frederick Ernest Nash, who's living there as well?
Leslie Manville traced her grandparents back to 1918 and found out that her grandfather had been living with a woman named Mabel and another man, Frederick Nash, who was their lodger. She finds out that Mabel and Frederick had an affair and a child, and her grandfather James moved out of the house, leaving them to it.
Father's name and surname is Frederick Ernest Nash, and the mother is Mabel Edwards. Oh my goodness.
James moved on from the marriage to Mabel with a woman named Harriet, Leslie's grandmother. It was all very dramatic and difficult to unravel, but seemed to boil down to how it was almost impossible for working-class people to afford to get divorced at the time, so her grandparents weren't legally married.
So these couples who are cohabiting without getting divorced, without being able to marry each other, whilst it's not a norm, it's certainly not that unusual.
Number 4. Abandoned.
Your mother was with this family only for 1 month, for a very, very short period of time.
Like Leslie Manville, Lulu had an old family mystery she wanted to solve. Why was her mother, one of 7 children, given up to another family? And why was it only her?
I have to say I'm feeling very angry with my grandparents. Willy-nilly having babies all over the place.
It certainly is awkward to learn information that makes you angry at your grandparents, though, and that's what happened. Elizabeth was the 4th-born child, and when only a few months old, she was given away willingly by her parents. Lulu found out that it was because they didn't have any money, and her grandfather was in and out of prison.
Child went to school yesterday for the first time and is very pleased with herself.
Elizabeth's birth parents initially failed to pay the first family to take her, and she found another, permanent home that thankfully took good care of her.
In a lot of respects, your mother has been a very, very fortunate child.
Yes, and that's what my uncle James said. She was lucky.
Number 3. Strike-breaking ancestor.
He's in a turret, chucking stones at them.
Something like that.
Pretty much.
Yes.
Jack Whitehall and his father Michael wanted to learn about their ancestor, Thomas Jones Phillips, who was a solicitor involved in monitoring industrial disputes in Wales in the 1830s. Phillips was tailing the Chartists, who, among other things, wanted universal male suffrage, that is, the right for all men, regardless of class, to vote.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
It is. Our ancestor, Thomas Jones Phillips. He's the dodgy emissary that's come to the meeting in like a bad disguise.
It's not that surprising to find out that someone as posh as Jack Whitehall had dodgy ancestors, but discovering that Phillips disguised himself to spy on the Chartists and report back about their activities was deeply reprehensible.
They're forming mobs and they're heading down towards Newport, and our ancestor is trailing them in his first-class coach, monitoring them at every point.
He was also involved in trying to convict many Chartists after a lethal riot, all in exchange for a cash reward he claimed not to know about. Number 2. The Orange Order.
My father was
He was an Orange man.
Oh, he was?
He was, eh?
David Tennant has always had strong connections to the church, with his father being a minister in the Church of Scotland. But he was completely unprepared to go to Northern Ireland and meet some distant Protestant relatives, discovering that one of them was in the Orange Order.
Was William in a lodge as well?
I don't know.
Right.
You could probably follow that through maybe through the Memorial Hall.
They told him this as he sat down for a cuppa and brought out an orange sash to show him, giving it to him to take to a nearby memorial hall and ask more questions about the relatives he didn't even know he had until recently. He talked to the camera crew about how disturbed he was to be given this information and handed the sash itself.
How did you feel when you were handed that sash?
Not great. Even now, I'm not that comfortable holding it.
Number 1. Slave-owning history.
This is shocking.
This episode made for very upsetting viewing, as TV chef Ainsley Harriott went to Jamaica to learn about his ancestor James Gordon Harriott. Nobody was prepared to learn that his family actually owned slaves in Jamaica at one point, and that his surname, Harriott, came from distant white ancestors.
So this was something that was passed down through the family, learning the skill and art
of purchasing your slaves.
Harriott and his family had previously assumed that they were descended from black slaves on Jamaica, so discovering this shook him to his core. It's very difficult information to come to terms with, as the historian pointed out how many slaves his family had once owned.
He owned 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 slaves.
I can see that.
No, actually.
One thing you can bet on when it comes to genealogy shows like Who Do You Think You Are is that someone is gonna be shook by what they learn. How would you feel if you found out you were descended from royalty, or that you had family that died during the Holocaust, or that maybe you came by your chosen profession, honestly? Check out these shocking reveals on Who Do You Think You Are to see how the celebs dealt with it.
It's John Frost, who stands charged with the crime of high treason by order of the magistrates.
Welcome to MsMojo. And today we're counting down 20 of the most shocking and surprising revelations on Who Do You Think You Are?
It's practically a line from Hamlet.
Number 20. Leslie Garrett and the possible poisoning.
Death from poisoning by carbolic acid, accidentally administered. Oh, for goodness sake. Wow! By whom?
Perhaps more shocking than the story itself was singer Leslie Garrett's overjoyed reaction to the fact that her great-great-grandmother died after ingesting carbolic acid. Contemporary news reports and the death certificate said that the carbolic acid, which was a commonly used disinfectant, was administered accidentally to Mary Ann Garrett.
The medicine bottle was also on the mantel shelf, and it too was labelled and similar in shape to the one containing the poison.
Though she only had a tablespoon of it, and a doctor was sent for immediately, she died in a matter of minutes. Garrett talks to a pathologist who says that a tablespoon was more than enough, and that many people actually died the same way back when the substance was regularly kept in houses.
But people were very concerned about this. There were about 200 deaths a year due to carbolic acid swallowed.
Garrett still suspected that her great-granddad Charlie might have done it on purpose.
My great-grandfather just said sorry, gave her the wrong bottle, and he was believed.
Number 19. Kate Winslet's imprisoned relative.
So Anders stole.
Yeah, and why did he steal?
Because he was starving,
yeah,
and so were his children.
His child, the youngest child, had died, and so he needed food for his family.
She headed to Sweden to learn about her ancestry on her mother's side and her great-great-great-grandfather Anders Johnson. But she soon found out not only that one of his children died young, but that in 1832 he was arrested, along with another man, for stealing barrels of potatoes.
Good on you, Anders. I would have stolen the potatoes as well.
She then finds out that he was sent to prison for this, and that he sadly died in prison in a nearby castle.
Stated that he is 42 years old and has never been suspected of any crime. My God, so he was only a year younger than me.
She goes to the castle to talk to another historian about what happened, finding out that he'd stolen other things too, including some beehives full of honey. He was sentenced to be whipped, but died when he contracted typhus before the sentence was carried out.
Buried April the 3rd, arrested man Anders Johnson, 43 years old, died of nerve fever.
Number 18. Nigella Lawson's vanished family.
It's very different from all those big Lions houses and everything, isn't it? So obviously a very small house, a lot of children, no money, no food,
and no sanitary conditions.
It's no secret that Nigella Lawson, whose father was a peer in the House of Lords and whose mother was a restaurant heiress, came for money. But that isn't the entire story, as she learned when she investigated her roots.
I mean, in itself, it doesn't tell me that much, that 2 children have apparently vanished.
She found that she had Dutch ancestry and a lot of Jewish ancestry, but also that her great-great-grandfather, Barnet Salmon, grew up in poverty.
Barnet was determined to break away from the poverty of his background. He escaped the East End slums in his early 20s and began to build a reputation as a tobacco dealer.
In the 1840s, Salmon and his siblings lived in a tiny house in Spitalfields, London, where multiple children died of diseases related to malnutrition and unsanitary living. She found this out after 2 of the children disappeared from records, and she went searching for their death certificates to put the pieces together.
Asher died in March 42, and Harriet in November 42, so that's pretty near one another.
Number 17. Graham Norton's shotgun wedding. Norton grew up in the Republic of Ireland, but his mother was Northern Irish and had roots in Belfast. So he headed across the border to learn about that side of the family, recalling childhood visits to Belfast during the Troubles as he went.
I loved going to Belfast because I loved my grandparents and stuff, but it was so scary.
He ran into trouble during the research though, because his great-grandmother had recorded 2 different maiden names on different documents. He wanted to know why, coming to suspect that she was illegitimate, and that's why she had no father listed on her marriage certificate.
That does really shock me, because even now you'd get a bit of a move on down the aisle.
But most shocking was learning that she was already 8 months pregnant when she walked down the aisle.
My grandmother would have been mortified if she'd known this. That her mother had been 8 months pregnant going down the aisle.
Number 16. Claire Balding's great-grandfather.
He's a very public figure, he's an MP, and he's clearly living a lifestyle that suggests he might be engaged in illegal acts.
Even more aristocratic than Nigella is Claire Balding. It's true that her lineage was even more well known before appearing on the show, and can eventually be traced back to Henry VII, disturbingly through more than one close relative.
These are all your Stanley family ancestors.
Bit overwhelming.
But the show focused largely on investigating her great-grandfather, Sir Malcolm Bullock, to determine whether or not he was gay.
And I think there he provides an opportunity for probably a group of gay men to basically socialise with each other.
Gosh, you just say that as if it's accepted fact. Group of gay MPs, Malcolm Bullock was one of them.
Bullock was an MP between the 1920s and 1950s, and there were always rumours that he was, but as Balding points out, at the time, it would have been a crime had he been discovered, and his career certainly would have ended, so it had to stay secret.
In my mind, there's no doubt that he was gay.
Number 15. Greg Davies' illegitimate ancestor.
So, William Owen is the name of my great-grandfather.
It would seem so, yes.
Though he grew up in Shropshire, Greg Davies' parents were both Welsh and drove him across the border so that he wouldn't be born in England. He found out that his great-grandmother hadn't been married to his great-grandfather, and their kids had been born out of wedlock.
That would have been a local scandal, do you think?
Yes, probably.
They weren't married?
No, they weren't, no. And they've had 2 children together.
She eventually took him to court to try and get the child support payments he owed her, but he didn't have any money.
And the reason he was never mentioned by our family is because no one, apart from Elizabeth, my great-grandmother, I don't think knew who he was.
He kept investigating William Owen, who turned out to have trouble with drink. He was even arrested at one point for being drunk and in charge of a horse and cart, as well as once attempting to climb Mount Snowdon in the middle of the night.
Mrs. Carroll said she could not say he was drunk, neither could she say he was sober, but he was more drunk than sober.
Number 14. Sarah Millican and the Pegasus disaster.
It says, it was our painful duty to announce the melancholy catastrophe, the loss of the Pegasus steamer.
None of Millican's relatives died in the Pegasus disaster in 1843, but one ancestor, James, did work for a shipping company that employed him and others to retrieve things from shipwrecks. This included the grisly work of bringing bodies to the surface, which families of the deceased would give rewards for.
The surface of the water was covered in the dead and the dying. The screeching was fearful. Wow. That's horrific, isn't it?
The details of the disaster were harrowing, but more shocking is that an event like this could be so widely forgotten, buried in 19th century newspapers.
The divers have 40% on the value of all they bring up. It's described as melancholy work, wrenching open boxes and tearing out their saturated contents.
She read through advertisements placed offering cash rewards for the recovery of loved ones' remains in these disturbing scenes. Number 13. David Tennant's Orange Order relatives. Though he believed nearly his entire family came from Scotland, Tennant went off to Northern Ireland to meet the relatives of his maternal great-grandfather after losing the trail for the Scottish side of the family.
My father was... he was an Orange man.
Oh, he was?
He was.
He was surprised to find out that his Northern Irish family weren't only Protestants, but that at least one of them had been an Orange man, a member of the notorious Orange Order. His relatives actually gave him one of the orange sashes they had, which shocked and disturbed him.
Was William in a lodge as well?
I don't know.
Right.
You could probably follow that through, maybe through the Memorial Hall.
He found it hard to reconcile that his family could have belonged to the Orange Order, particularly during the Troubles.
How did you feel when you were handed that sash?
Not great. Even now, I'm not that comfortable holding it.
Number 12. Sheridan Smith and the alleged arsonist. This one was full of twists and turns, as Sheridan Smith went to Sheffield to unearth her family history.
Shortly before 4 o'clock this morning, a fire broke out on the premises of Mr. Doubleday, Woodman Inn, Sheffield Moor.
She was looking for information about her great-great-grandfather, Benjamin Doubleday, who tried to make it as a musician playing the banjo, but she found out that he had a number of suspicious arsons in his history.
It is, and he taught himself to bring up his kids and everything he's done for his family, that this now just seems like a different person.
A pub he owned actually burned down when the building was totally empty, leading investigators to suspect it was done for the insurance, charging him for it.
There's scarcely any furniture in any of the rooms. Doubleday was the only person on the premises. He was leaving the house this week, having removed most of his belongings.
But she kept digging and eventually learned that he was found not guilty, so hopefully that verdict was correct and he didn't start the fire. Number 11. Stephen Fry's wartime history.
Place of death, Auschwitz camp. So that's my grandfather's sister, my mother's aunt.
An immense tragedy was uncovered when Stephen Fry traced his roots, wanting to learn more about his Jewish heritage. It was difficult to watch him find out that some of his closest relatives, including his great-aunt, perished in Auschwitz during the war after being sent there by the Nazis.
So that's the other girl. That's Elisa. Date of death 44, Auschwitz camp.
His family didn't initially know exactly what had happened to them, only that they had been taken to Auschwitz and never heard from again, but presumably had died.
It's so stupid because I knew this. We all knew they'd died, at least believed it.
He had an old family photograph, and it was deeply heartbreaking putting faces to the names as he goes through the list of his cousins, most of whom died within the walls of the Nazis' most notorious camps. Number 10. Boris Johnson is related to King George II. As an old Etonian and Oxbridge graduate, it shouldn't really come as a surprise that Boris Johnson is posh enough to be related to royalty.
So she is, of course, Augusta Caroline, Princess of Brunswick.
Oh, yeah, she rings a bell.
And the wonderful thing is her mother is...
Her mother is... Oh, look at this, Augusta Hanover.
But back in 2008, he was notable as one of the first celebs to find a King of England in his family tree. Turns out that Johnson is directly descended from King George II. For those who don't know their horrible history songs, he was the bad one. King George was a Hanoverian, so an ancestor of our current royal family. That means that Boris is distantly related to the Queen, the Swedish and Dutch royals, and even the Romanovs.
I guess I always thought of myself, and always thought of our family as being basically a bunch of Turkish, Jewish, mixed with this weird granny butter Baron de Pfeffel stuff. So I always felt a bit of a, as I say, the product of incomers, product of newcomers to Britain.
Number 9. Mark Wright didn't expect the Spanish Inquisition. Towie star Mark Wright has always believed that his blood was Italian. Turns out, that was a myth. The family was Spanish, hailing from Jaén in Andalusia. Mark discovered that their roots were also Jewish. The family had fled Spain to escape the Inquisition after one ancestor was burnt at the stake and another subjected to torture. The tortured man was named David Antonio. He managed to hold out long enough to convince his tormentors that he was not a practicing Jew and concocted a plan to escape the country with his family. On a lighter note, he was also a master swordsman, so Mark got to do some swashbuckling. Number 8. Josh Widdicombe is descended from Henry VIII, possibly. Josh Widdicombe's family history journey took him back to Mary Boleyn. She was his 14 times great-grandmother, sister to Anne Boleyn, and mistress of Henry VIII.
My great whatever aunt is Anne Boleyn.
She's also the main character in The Other Boleyn Girl. Many historians believe that Catherine Knollys, Mary's daughter, was also Henry's illegitimate child. Catherine is also Josh's ancestor. As the comedian was very excited to discover, this means he could be a direct descendant of Henry VIII.
She, we know, had a relationship with the king, with King Henry VIII.
No.
Yes. Mary was Henry's mistress.
However, even if this is fake news, Josh still has some royal blood. On the Boleyn side, he can trace his ancestry back to King Henry I. So there's a consolation prize.
Oh my word. King Edward I.
Number 7. Jack Whitehall's unlikable ancestor.
So what happened then?
Well, hopefully they beat him up.
Comedian and actor Jack Whitehall has made a career out of being posh. That is to say, a lot of his comedy involves poking fun at himself and his background. Taking part in Who Do You Think You Are with his dad Michael, Jack hoped to find some ancestors who were a bit more relatable. What he got was Thomas Jones Phillips, a lawyer and, as Jack puts it, a perennial snitch.
Some of the reigning Chartists get put on trial.
Please don't be.
Jones Phillips played a part in opposing the Chartists, a political group who fought for working men to have the vote. During the Newport Uprising, Jack's ancestor tracked down their inspirational leader, John Frost, and turned him in for the reward. His 4 times great-grandson was not impressed.
And in fact, knowing what I know about you and your ancestry, I think going forward, I'm going to have to sever ties with you and focus on Mummy.
Number 6. Patrick Stewart's father suffered from shell shock.
And here he is again in what would have been his Second World War uniform.
When Patrick Stewart agreed to take part in Who Do You Think You Are, he planned to find out about his father's military service. Stewart's childhood home had been marred by domestic violence, but his memories of his father were mixed. He remembered the violent man, but also the exciting war stories his father used to tell. In this deeply personal episode, Stewart wanted to explore and understand the conflicting sides of his father's character.
But in an aerial attack, a nearby bomb explosion gave him shell shock, from which he still suffers.
Over the course of the program, the actor discovered that his father suffered from shell shock. We would now call it PTSD.
We know now that it builds up a level of stress and anger. And of course, what I experienced from 1945 onwards was an angry man. Who maybe hadn't been angry before.
This discovery gave the actor some new insight into a man who may have been different had he never gone to war. Number 5. Judi Dench's Shakespeare connection. Judi Dench is now a familiar face on the big screen, thanks to film roles in projects such as Shakespeare in Love and Philomena. But primarily, she's a Shakespearean actress. Her first role at the Old Vic Theatre was playing Ophelia in Hamlet.
Better, you might know the English name better, Elsinore.
It's Elsinore.
Yeah, that's...
The play is set in Denmark in the royal castle of Elsinore, where Ophelia lives with her father. While investigating her family history, Dame Judy was shocked to discover that she actually had an ancestor who lived in the real Danish castle. Even better, she turned out to be related to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who were actual characters in the play.
So those were part of his family?
Those were part of his family.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern?
Exactly.
Who Shakespeare?
It was an emotional discovery for the actress and a fascinating coincidence for the viewer.
Well, maybe the stories that Will Kemp brought back could have been some kind of inspiration to Shakespeare to write about.
Number 4. Alan Cummings' grandfather's real cause of death. Actor Alan Cummings investigated a family story that was a bit closer to home. His mother's father, Tom, was killed while serving as a police officer in Malaysia. Supposedly, a gun that he was cleaning backfired.
You don't clean a gun like this, and you don't kill yourself like this.
But when Alan spoke to an old service comrade, he uncovered a different story. His grandfather died from a gun wound to the back of the head.
And that was that he was playing Russian roulette.
The story was he had been playing Russian roulette. Apparently, he was a habitual player. It is suspected that his luck ran out or he got careless. Does this mean he accidentally shot himself? Or did somebody find out he was cheating and have him killed? Either way, it wasn't the story that his grandson expected to find.
I feel really sad for him.
Number 3. Matthew Pinsent, related to God? There have been a few instances of royal ancestors cropping up on Who Do You Think You Are, but the reveal during Matthew Pinsent's episode is one of the most bizarre.
So your direct ancestor is
Edward
I. Yeah.
The Olympic medalist traced his lineage back to the Plantagenet kings. He discovered that he was a direct descendant of Edward I. He was then shown an archaic scroll that follows the line of succession back even further. As the medieval royals were keen to justify their claim to the divine right of kings, the scroll takes some unexpected turns.
There's Jesus. Stop it. Why do they put Jesus on there?
According to this particular document, Matthew is related to Jesus, King David, Adam and Eve, and, right at the very top, God. As he says, that's pretty much as far as you can go.
Matthew is, with certainty, directly descended from kings.
Number 2. Ainsley Harriot's slave-owning ancestors.
So the Harriet was originally a white name then?
Ainsley Harriot's search took him to the Caribbean island of Jamaica, where his father grew up. Although he assumed that his ancestors had been brought to Jamaica as slaves, the TV chef was still in for an unpleasant shock. He discovered that his family name originally came from a white slave owner, his 2 times great-grandfather, James Gordon Harriot.
I need to sit down, this is so sorry.
Ainsley visited the estate where slaves and slave owners, both his distant relatives, once lived. Good or bad, it's part of my makeup, he concluded. The history of the Harriot family really encapsulates the history of the West Indies.
That shows owning slaves went back generations in the Harriot family.
Number 1. Danny Dyer's royal pedigree. Will there ever be an episode like this one? Professional Cockney geezer Danny Dyer didn't expect to find any money in his family tree. At the beginning of his journey, we didn't either. Tragic tales of poverty and the workhouse began the story, but then something remarkable happened. He hit an aristocratic line. After the first breakthrough, they just keep coming.
And I think actually there is more than a passing resemblance.
He learned about Thomas Cromwell, advisor to Henry VIII and his 15 times great-grandfather. He then followed the Seymour line, Cromwell married his son into nobility, and discovered he was directly descended from the Plantagenet kings.
So you are directly descended from King Edward III of England?
Can't be. Can't be.
Among his other direct ancestors, he can count Eleanor of Aquitaine, William the Conqueror and King Louis IX, who was even canonized as a saint.
That is my 22 times great-grandfather, Edward III. So basically, the king.
So, do you have any family stories that you'd like to dig deeper on? Have you ever had the chance to visit distant relatives in another country? What's the most exciting thing you know about your family tree? I'm so interested. As always, thank you for joining me on this illuminating journey through the MsMojo archives. See ya. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from MsMojo. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.